It was a warm Saturday morning when the trouble began. The kind of morning when I usually sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee, reading my mail in peace. But instead of peace, I got glitter. Lots of it. It all started when Karen, my neighbor from 3 houses down, decided that the community mailbox was her personal security checkpoint. I heard the sharp clank of metal as I approached the row of mailboxes. She was standing there in her lemon-yellow tracksuit, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, flipping through envelopes that clearly weren't hers. When she saw me, she froze, then tried to pretend she was just checking for suspicious deliveries. Her words, not mine. I said, "Suspicious like my electric bill?" and pointed at the letter in her hand. She flinched, mumbled something about HOA authorized oversight, and shoved it back into my slot. I didn't argue. I'd already learned that Karen's greatest weakness was public embarrassment, and she hated looking foolish. Instead, I smiled and told her she might want to step back before something surprising happened. She squinted at me but ignored the warning. She reached for another envelope. That was when it happened. A small pop echoed down the cul-de-sac, followed by a spray of gold and pink glitter bursting from my mailbox like a confetti cannon. Karen screamed, stumbled backward, and fell into the hedges. She emerged seconds later looking like a disco ball that had survived a minor explosion. I could barely hold my laughter. The glitter bomb had been my own creation, a harmless but spectacular deterrent after weeks of missing mail. Each component was perfectly legal: compressed air, biodegradable glitter, and a sticker that read, "Property of the owner." I'd only intended it as a deterrent, not a showpiece. But seeing her dripping with sparkles, sputtering in outrage, I realized I'd achieved both. She accused me of assault. I told her to read the label. It clearly said, "Do not tamper." The irony was delicious. A few neighbors peeked out, phones in hand. Someone even laughed out loud. Karen shouted about privacy violations and vowed to report this to the HOA. I waved cheerfully and said, "You do that." By noon, my porch camera had already captured her marching toward the HOA president's house with glitter still clinging to her hair like cursed fairy dust. I figured that was the end of it, one more tantrum for the community gossip archive. But Karen was different. She didn't get mad. She got organized. The next morning, an official-looking envelope appeared on my doorstep. Inside was a notice citing me for unauthorized hazardous materials on HOA property. According to her complaint, my glitter bomb had posed a safety risk to community residents and pets. The best part? The letter was signed not by the HOA president, but by Karen herself, who apparently fancied herself as acting compliance officer. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Still, I wasn't foolish enough to ignore it. I called the real HOA president, Mr. Green, who was just as confused. He hadn't approved any such letter. "Between you and me," he sighed, "Karen's been enthusiastic lately." Translation: she'd been a menace. He asked me to send a copy of the notice and promised to handle it. But by afternoon, another surprise arrived. Karen standing on my lawn with her phone out, recording herself for what looked suspiciously like a live video. She announced, "I'm documenting ongoing violations for evidence submission." I asked who she was submitting it to. "To the community board," she said dramatically, "and possibly to federal authorities." I told her she might want to consult a lawyer before accusing someone of glitter terrorism. That got her attention. For a moment, she faltered. Then her expression hardened. "This isn't over," she said, brushing a final fleck of glitter from her sleeve. "People like you think you can make a mockery of community rules." I told her I didn't need to make a mockery of them. She was doing fine on her own. She stormed off without another word. That night, I reviewed my porch cam footage and saved the glitter explosion clip to a secure drive. Something told me it might come in handy. Sure enough, the next morning, my mailbox was sealed shut with bright yellow caution tape. A handwritten sign read, "Under investigation, do not use." Karen stood nearby, clipboard in hand, directing a pair of confused landscapers as if she were commanding a SWAT team. When I asked what she thought she was doing, she said she'd reported the mailbox as a crime scene. I laughed out loud. "You mean the glitter?" I asked. She pointed dramatically. "Tampering with mail is a federal offense." I nodded. "You're right. It's a good thing I'm not the one who opened it." The landscapers tried not to smile. By the third day, even the mail carrier refused to deliver. He told me he'd been instructed by a community official not to touch my box until further notice. I explained that Karen had no such authority, and he just shrugged. "Buddy, I'm not getting in the middle of this war," he said, and drove off. That was when I decided to escalate. I installed a motion-activated speaker system beside the mailbox, disguised as a decorative rock. When triggered, it played a polite but firm message: "Please step away from private property. You are being recorded." Simple, effective, and fully legal. I didn't tell Karen. I wanted her to discover it the hard way. The next morning, I watched from my window as she approached again, clipboard ready. The system activated right on cue. She jumped so high she nearly dropped her phone. Then, realizing she was on camera again, she began yelling about harassment and surveillance violations. She actually threatened to sue me for psychological distress. I didn't say a word. Instead, I printed a copy of the federal postal regulations and taped it to the mailbox, highlighting the section about mail tampering penalties. Then I added a small note underneath: "Knowledge is power." By evening, the HOA group chat was buzzing. Screenshots of the glitter explosion video were circulating, and someone had edited it into a meme titled "Glittergate." Karen was furious. She tried to get the clip removed, but it was already everywhere, even the local Facebook group. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. Karen's obsession had turned into a full-blown crusade for control. She wasn't going to stop until she either humiliated me publicly or forced me out of the neighborhood. What she didn't realize was that I was already preparing my next move, one that would expose just how deep her meddling had gone. The glitter was only the beginning. The morning after Glittergate, my phone buzzed non-stop. Friends from the neighborhood group chat sent me screenshots of Karen's latest posts, a series of long, self-righteous paragraphs accusing me of weaponizing glitter and endangering community stability. She'd uploaded photos of herself still sparkling, claiming the glitter contained chemical irritants and that she'd had to seek medical advice. One of her hashtags was #JusticeForKaren. Another was #MailboxAssault. I almost spat out my coffee. By noon, she'd escalated. A new HOA notice appeared taped to every mailbox on the street, stamped with a knockoff HOA logo she must have printed at home. It announced an emergency safety audit of all community mailboxes. Every resident was required to submit inspection access to her by the end of the week. I stood there holding the paper, trying to decide if this was more absurd or impressive. Her need for control had mutated into a bureaucracy of one. Most of the neighbors laughed it off. But a few, especially the newer residents, were nervous. Karen had a talent for sounding official, and she carried herself like she'd been elected to office. People didn't want trouble. She fed off that. When she saw me reading her notice, she approached with that tight, performative smile of hers. "Glad you saw it," she said. "I'll need to access your mailbox tomorrow morning." I told her no. Her smile vanished like a mask dropping. "You don't have the authority to refuse," she snapped. "Neither do you," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "Then I'll mark you as non-compliant. We'll see what the board says about that." I almost pitied her, almost. Karen's entire identity revolved around the illusion of control. Her career as a local real estate agent had slowed down since the market cooled, and she'd replaced lost clients with community drama. She saw herself as a guardian of standards, but what she really protected was her own ego. My harmless glitter trap had struck at the center of her power fantasy. The next day, she made her move. Around 10 a.m., a white van with a mail service inspection magnet on its side rolled up to my property. Karen stood beside it, clipboard in hand, flanked by two teenagers wearing orange vests. They were her nephews, apparently, drafted for volunteer compliance work. I stepped outside, camera already recording. "Karen," I said, "you're impersonating federal employees. That's a felony." "They're contractors," she replied confidently. "I'm authorized to supervise until the issue's resolved." "Authorized by who?" "The community." "You mean yourself." She scowled. "If you don't cooperate, I'll have to escalate this matter to postal authorities." "Please do," I said, smiling. "I'd love to hear what they think about you opening my mail." That hit a nerve. She snapped her fingers at the boys. "Pack it up," she said through gritted teeth. Then she leaned close and hissed, "You think you're clever, don't you? That little prank humiliated me." I kept my tone calm. "If you stopped opening other people's mail, you'd stay glitter-free." She turned red, spun on her heel, and stormed off. That afternoon, my wife, who until then had watched the whole circus with amused detachment, told me she was getting concerned. "She's obsessed, Nate. This isn't just nosiness anymore." I agreed. So I took it to the next step. I contacted our local postmaster, Mr. Hanley, who knew me well enough from years of mail drops. When I showed him the footage and the fake inspection notice, his eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I know that woman," he said. "She's filed half a dozen complaints in the past month, about everything from mailbox paint colors to imaginary tampering." "Can you do anything about it?" I asked. "Oh, I can do better than that," he said. "We'll open a formal report. If she keeps this up, she'll be facing real charges." It was satisfying, but I didn't broadcast it. I knew Karen thrived on confrontation. The quieter I stayed, the louder she'd self-destruct. 2 days later, her meltdown reached a new level. The HOA president, Mr. Green, called an emergency meeting in the clubhouse. The email said, "Mailbox concerns and community behavior." Everyone knew who that meant. I showed up early, sat near the back, and watched Karen march in like a prosecutor ready to deliver a closing argument. She carried a binder thicker than a law textbook. When the meeting started, she stood up immediately. "Before we proceed," she said, "I'd like to submit evidence of escalating misconduct from one of our residents." Mr. Green sighed. "Karen, please keep this brief." She didn't. For 20 minutes, she presented screenshots, photos, and even printouts of ReddiT posts about glitter bombs, as if I'd invented a global conspiracy. She spoke about community integrity, psychological warfare, and the erosion of mutual trust. It was pure theater. People shifted in their seats, some amused, others mortified. When she finally paused for breath, Mr. Green asked if anyone else wanted to respond. I raised my hand. I stood up, walked to the front, and placed a USB drive on the table. "This," I said, "is video footage from my security camera. It shows Ms. Karen here opening my mailbox, triggering the glitter device clearly marked with a warning label. It also shows her impersonating postal inspectors with 2 minors. I've already submitted a copy to the U.S. Postal Service." A silence fell over the room. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mr. Green pressed his lips together, clearly trying not to smirk. "That will be sufficient," he said. Meeting adjourned. The crowd dispersed quickly. I left without a word. Karen, however, didn't. She waited outside the clubhouse, her face pale, hands trembling. "You think you can humiliate me publicly?" she said in a low voice. "You've just declared war." I looked her in the eye. "No, Karen. I'm just defending my mail." She glared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You'll regret this." That night, I double-checked every camera on my property. Motion lights, recording angles, timestamps, all perfect. I wasn't paranoid. I'd seen what she was capable of when she felt cornered. Sure enough, around midnight, my driveway alarm pinged. I switched on the monitor and saw Karen's silhouette near the mailbox, flashlight in hand. She was wearing gloves. I couldn't believe it. After everything, she was back. I opened the front door and called out, "Federal offense, round 2?" She froze like a kid caught sneaking cookies. For a second, I thought she might bolt. Instead, she started shouting about checking for tampering evidence. I told her I was calling the sheriff. That did it. She ran. By morning, the sheriff's deputy, a friend of mine named Tyler, dropped by to take a report. He watched the footage, shaking his head. "She's lucky you didn't press charges last time," he said. "Want me to have a word?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's give her some rope first." He grinned. "You always play the long game, huh?" "Always." For the next few days, I stayed quiet, but I noticed Karen growing increasingly paranoid. She'd installed 2 extra cameras on her porch, posted laminated under surveillance signs, and even started wearing a wide-brimmed hat whenever she walked past my house, maybe to avoid facial recognition. It would have been funny if it weren't so sad. Then came the twist. A delivery truck pulled up one afternoon with a large package addressed to Karen L. The driver accidentally left it at my porch. It was heavy, wrapped in brown paper, no return label. Out of habit, I called over to her yard. "Hey Karen, got a package for you." She didn't answer. So I messaged her through the community app. She replied immediately, "Do not touch it. I did not order anything." That was odd. I told her I'd just place it by her gate. But curiosity got the better of me. I checked the tracking number online. It was from an online novelty shop specializing in prank items. The sender? Listed as anonymous. I didn't open it, of course. But I left it in her yard and set up my camera just in case. 10 minutes later, she emerged wearing gloves and sunglasses, carrying tongs like she was handling radioactive material. She prodded the box, muttered something, then dragged it into her garage. An hour later, I heard a muffled pop, followed by an unmistakable shriek. I rushed outside just in time to see glitter pouring out her garage door. Gold, pink, blue. Everywhere. She burst out coughing, her face smeared with sparkles, eyes wild. I hadn't sent it. But whoever had perfect timing. And as she stood there in the shimmering cloud, screaming about harassment and conspiracies, I realized something important. The neighborhood was officially turning against her. Glittergate 2.0 had just begun. By the next morning, our street looked like the aftermath of a Mardi Gras parade. Karen's driveway, her walkway, even the rose bushes near her porch glimmered under the sunlight, reflecting flecks of gold and pink that refused to leave. The air itself seemed to shimmer. It would have been beautiful if it weren't for the screaming. She'd been out there since dawn with a leaf blower, a bucket, an industrial cleaner, muttering about domestic terrorism, while glitter sparkled in her hair like a halo of irony. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, pretending not to notice as she kept glancing toward me. She must have known I hadn't sent that second glitter bomb. I had the perfect poker face, but I also knew she was looking for someone to blame. And blaming me was her comfort zone. It gave her power. Around mid-morning, she vanished inside her house, only to reappear wearing a blue HOA vest I'd never seen before, complete with a plastic badge that said Community Safety Officer. She started knocking on doors, clipboard in hand, going house to house. My phone buzzed as neighbors texted updates like it was breaking news. Apparently, she was collecting testimonies about mailbox sabotage and ongoing harassment. She even asked people to sign witness statements. The absurdity of it all was almost impressive. Karen didn't just escalate conflict, she built an entire bureaucracy around it. When she finally reached my house, I opened the door before she could knock. She looked startled but quickly regained composure. "Mr. Turner," she said, voice dripping with forced politeness, "as part of an ongoing community investigation, I need your signature confirming whether you have or have not used explosive materials within HOA limits." I stared at her. "Explosive materials? You mean glitter?" She frowned. "You're taking this lightly. That package yesterday could have caused serious harm. I folded my arms. Then why was it addressed to you? Her jaw twitched. I believe you're trying to frame me. That nearly made me laugh out loud. Karen, I said evenly, you've been filming me, writing fake violation notices, impersonating postal workers, and now you're accusing me of sending you something I didn't send. Maybe it's time you realized you're in way over your head. She didn't blink. You'll regret saying that. Then she marched away, her glitter-coated sneakers squeaking across the pavement. Later that afternoon, the HOA group chat exploded again. Karen had posted a formal community alert claiming an anonymous vandal was distributing dangerous parcels, and that residents should report suspicious creative devices. She even attached photos of her glitter-covered garage, calling it forensic evidence. The replies ranged from amused emojis to sarcastic comments like, dangerous levels of sparkle detected, and we're under glitter attack, send help. The sarcasm only fueled her fury. By evening, she'd left the group entirely and started her own one-person version of it called HOA Safety Watch. That night, things got stranger. I was sitting in my backyard, enjoying the quiet, when I noticed the faint red blink of a camera light across the street, pointed directly at my house. I sighed, walked over, and found a brand-new motion sensor camera mounted on a post near her fence. She'd angled it to face my mailbox. Enough was enough. I took photos for documentation and sent them to Mr. Green, the HOA president, along with a short note. Karen's surveillance expansion program appears to be in full swing. He replied almost instantly. I'm dealing with it. Trust me. The next day, an HOA board representative showed up at Karen's house. Through my porch camera feed, I watched as they argued on her lawn. The representative gestured toward my property and seemed to be explaining privacy laws. Karen crossed her arms, shaking her head. She looked like a queen under siege. When the rep finally left, Karen stood there fuming, then did something I didn't expect. She pulled down the camera and stormed inside. I thought, for a brief and naive moment, that maybe she was done. She wasn't. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from a law firm downtown. It was an official cease and desist notice accusing me of continued harassment through electronic devices, dangerous contraptions, and reputational harm. It demanded that I cease all forms of digital and physical aggression toward Ms. Karen L. and pay for property cleaning damages, amounting to $2,487. The absurdity was breathtaking. I called the number listed on the letter. The receptionist sighed before I could even finish introducing myself. "Oh, you must be the glitter case," she said. "Don't worry," she used an online template. "It's not a real filing." When I asked how she knew, she said Karen had already sent the same thing to 2 other neighbors over minor disagreements. We told her we don't take harassment by yard decoration cases. I thanked her and hung up. But I didn't throw the letter away, I framed it. Hung it in my living room like an art piece titled, Persistence of Nonsense. The next morning, my wife suggested we take a weekend trip to her sister's cabin just to clear our head. I agreed, but part of me hesitated. Leaving Karen unsupervised felt like leaving a toddler alone in a fireworks store. Still, I locked every gate, set every camera alert, and hit the road. When we returned Sunday evening, something immediately felt off. The driveway was clean, too clean. The mailbox was open, the motion light unplugged, and the warning sticker gone. I checked the footage and saw exactly what I'd feared. Karen had come over the previous night, waited until 2 a.m., and methodically peeled off every private property label. Then she'd sprayed down the area with what looked like soap water. She even waved at the camera afterward, mouthing the words, "My neighborhood now." That wasn't the part that made my stomach drop. At 3 a.m., after she left, a delivery van stopped in front of her house. 2 men unloaded another large box, identical to the last one, and carried it up her porch. The driver wore a hoodie with the same logo from the prank store as before. The timestamp was clear. This wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone was feeding her paranoia on purpose. The next morning, I decided to find out who. I called the store's customer support and explained the situation. After verifying my details, the representative hesitated, then said, "I can't give you names, but I can tell you the sender used the same billing address as the recipient. That means she sent it to herself." For a moment, I didn't speak. She'd been sending herself glitter bombs. That night, I printed the confirmation email, highlighted the relevant lines, and slipped it anonymously into her mailbox with a sticky note that said, "Maybe check your own receipts." By morning, the whole street knew. Karen stormed out of her house, waving the paper in the air, screaming about identity theft. Neighbors peeked from windows, phones recording. She accused me, the mail carrier, even her own sister, who happened to be visiting that day. When the mail carrier politely suggested she calm down, she called the police. The officers arrived, looking exhausted before they even stepped out of the car. I met them halfway down the driveway and handed them copies of my security footage. They asked Karen to step inside. She refused, yelling that she was the victim of a community conspiracy. One officer finally sighed and said, "Ma'am, we're going to need you to stop calling us over glitter." That line became legend. It made its way into memes, group chats, even t-shirts someone sold at the next neighborhood fair. "Stop calling us over glitter" became our unofficial slogan. Karen, however, was unraveling. She started spending her evenings sitting on her porch, binoculars in hand, watching my house like she expected another glitter strike. The tension was both ridiculous and sad, a suburban Cold War fought with sparkles and paranoia. Then, just when I thought things couldn't escalate further, they did. Late one night, I woke to a sound like breaking glass. I rushed outside and found my mailbox lying on the ground, post snapped in half. Glitter, the old residue, shimmered in the moonlight. And on top of the pile was a note scrawled in red marker, "No more warnings." I stared at it, heart pounding. This wasn't a prank anymore. It was vandalism. And considering the history, I had a very good idea who did it. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I called Deputy Tyler again and sent him the footage. He showed up the next morning, quiet but serious. "That's enough," he said. "We're filing a restraining order this time." For the first time, I didn't feel amused. I just felt tired. This war of glitter and ego had spiraled into something darker. Tyler nodded toward the broken mailbox. "You want my advice? Replace it with steel. And maybe add a surprise inside, something legal but educational." I smiled faintly. "Already ahead of you." That night, I began designing what I privately called Glitter Trap 2.0, a harmless but unforgettable device that would make sure, once and for all, that Karen learned the one rule she refused to understand: never mess with someone else's mailbox. And this time, the whole neighborhood would see it happen. I spent the next week quietly working on my masterpiece, not out of spite, but out of necessity. Karen had crossed a line when she destroyed the mailbox. The first glitter bomb had been a playful deterrent, but this time I wanted a lesson so unmistakable that even her titanium ego couldn't spin it into victimhood. So, late at night, after the street had gone dark, I set up shop in my garage. My wife, ever the voice of reason, only shook her head when she saw the blueprints spread across the workbench. "You're not seriously doing this again," she said. "Not the same," I replied. "Educational, remember? Not vengeful." Your definition of educational usually ends with someone covered in glitter. I grinned. That's what makes it memorable. The new setup was elegant in its simplicity, a pressure-activated glitter dispersal chamber disguised as a standard locking mailbox. I used food-grade powder and biodegradable glitter. I wasn't trying to kill anyone, just their dignity. This time, however, I added a twist. A motion sensor that triggered a recorded voice message the moment the mailbox was touched. Calm, professional, and just ominous enough to make a point. "Warning: you are interacting with federal property. This activity is being recorded and will be reported." I recorded the line myself, then ran it through a text-to-speech filter so it sounded like something straight out of a government notice. By the end of the week, my new mailbox looked completely ordinary. Black steel post, polished front, subtle, private mail, federal jurisdiction lettering across the top. It was the sort of thing Karen couldn't resist touching. I'd baited it perfectly. I didn't have to wait long. Saturday morning, around 9:30, the familiar sound of her sandals slapping the pavement echoed down the street. She was holding a new clipboard, wearing oversized sunglasses and that same HOA vest like she'd been promoted by herself again. I was trimming the hedge when she stopped near the curb, pretending to examine something on her phone. I didn't say a word. She waited until she thought I wasn't looking, then casually strolled up to the mailbox. The second her hand touched the latch, the motion sensor chirped to life. "Warning," the voice boomed, "you are interacting with federal property. This activity is being recorded." Karen screamed and stumbled backward, clutching her chest. Then came the glitter, a magnificent plume of blue and silver bursting upward in a sparkling fountain, coating her face, vest, and sunglasses in a storm of shimmering humiliation. She shrieked, waving her arms like she was under attack. I couldn't hold back my laughter this time. Neighbors stepped outside, drawn by the noise, and saw the spectacle unfold in all its slow-motion glory. A few even applauded. Karen, trembling with rage, pointed a glitter-covered finger at me. You're insane. You've booby-trapped federal property." "It's private property," I corrected calmly. "And it's clearly marked." "I'm calling the police," she screamed. "Good idea," I said. "They can tell you what tampering with mailboxes actually means." By the time the officers arrived, the same two who'd visited during the last glitter fiasco, Karen was pacing like a caged tiger. They listened patiently as she launched into a 10-minute tirade about psychological abuse, neighborhood terrorism, and my ongoing glitter warfare. When she finally paused for breath, the younger officer turned to me. "You said she opened it again?" I nodded and handed him the footage from the security camera. He watched for 30 seconds before sighing. "Ma'am, he's right. You were warned not to interfere with mailboxes. This is on you." Karen's face turned crimson. But he planned this." The officer shrugged. "He planned for someone to break the law, sure. That doesn't make it illegal." It was possibly the most satisfying sentence I'd ever heard. After they left, Karen retreated into her house and pulled the blinds shut. For a few days the street was eerily peaceful. The HOA board, embarrassed by the attention, issued a notice reminding residents to respect private property and federal postal regulations. It wasn't directed at anyone by name, but everyone knew who it meant. I thought that was the end of it. But with Karen, peace was never permanent. It was a pause before the next explosion. 3 nights later, at 2 a.m., I woke to a loud metallic bang. I checked the camera feed and saw her silhouette again, crouched beside my mailbox with something shiny in her hand, a wrench. My heart sank. She was trying to dismantle it. I didn't rush outside. Instead, I watched as she loosened one of the bolts, muttering to herself. The moment she yanked the mailbox off the post, a faint hiss filled the air. The backup glitter charge I'd hidden inside had been triggered by pressure release. A heartbeat later, a geyser of purple glitter erupted straight into her face, followed by the pre-recorded voice. "Tampering detected. Authorities notified." She screamed again, dropping the wrench and stumbling backward, coughing and sputtering as glitter rained down around her. She bolted down the street, tripping over her own feet, leaving a sparkling trail like a comet of chaos. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. Someone's doorbell camera had captured the entire thing, and by noon, the video had gone viral on our local Facebook group under the caption, "HOA Enforcement Goes Nuclear." Within hours, it had hundreds of shares and a remixed soundtrack. Karen stopped leaving her house for 2 days. But the damage was already done. Mr. Green called me, half laughing, half exasperated. You know, Nate, I can't officially condone glitter warfare, but I've never seen justice served so beautifully. Consider it a public service announcement, I said. Still, even I knew she wouldn't stay quiet for long. When control is someone's oxygen, embarrassment feels like suffocation. And sure enough, on the third day, she emerged again, not in her usual athletic gear, but in business attire, complete with a folder under her arm and determination in her step. She knocked on my door at exactly noon. I opened it, curious. "I've spoken to legal counsel," she said coolly. "And I've filed a defamation complaint." "Against who?" "You. And the HOA. And possibly the entire Facebook group." I blinked. "You're suing the internet?" "If that's what it takes to restore order, yes." I almost admired her persistence. "Karen," I said, "you might want to check the definition of defamation. Truth doesn't qualify." Her lips tightened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I paused. "Honestly? A little." She left without another word, but her eyes carried the same promise they always did, that this wasn't over. And indeed, it wasn't. That evening, an HOA-wide email landed in everyone's inbox. The subject line read, "Community Cleanup Initiative." Inside was a message, clearly written by Karen under the guise of collective action, demanding that all residents participate in a mandatory neighborhood cleanup day, specifically targeting decorative pollutants and unsafe personal installations. It was transparently about me, but the irony was that she had just made it easier for me to turn the tables again. I replied all with a short message. "Fully agree. Let's all clean up, starting with unnecessary personal cameras and unauthorized HOA badges." Half the neighborhood hit reply all with laughing emojis. A few added their own sarcastic contributions like, "Can we scrub the glitter off Karen's reputation too?" The response was so overwhelming that by morning, Karen deleted the email thread. But she wasn't done scheming. That afternoon, she filed a noise complaint against me, apparently claiming my mailbox emitted threatening sounds. The city inspector who came out was baffled. I demonstrated the system, and he nearly doubled over laughing when he heard the official-sounding warning, "You are being recorded." "She really said this was a noise hazard?" he asked. "She did." He signed off the inspection form. "Mailboxes fine. Residents not." By then, the story had spread beyond our subdivision. A local news outlet picked it up under the headline, "HOA Drama Erupts into Glitter War." The article quoted anonymous residents describing Karen as well-meaning but intense. My favorite line was from an older neighbor who said, "I've seen wars with less sparkle." Karen, of course, blamed me for media exploitation. She even cornered a reporter who came by to get neighborhood shots and tried to convince him the glitter was toxic. The poor guy just thanked her for the quote and left. That night, I sat on the porch watching the sunset reflect off faint traces of glitter still embedded in the sidewalk. My wife joined me, sipping tea. "You realize," she said, "this entire street's going to sparkle until next year. Maybe it'll remind people to mind their own mailboxes," I said. She smiled. "You think she'll ever stop?" I looked across at Karen's house, where the curtains twitched like a predator waiting for movement. "No," I said. "But she'll get quieter." I was wrong. Because the next morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery, the low growl of an engine and the unmistakable beep of a reversing vehicle. I stepped outside and froze. Karen was in my yard, standing beside a rented power washer, and she was pointing it directly at my mailbox. She shouted over the engine, "I'm cleaning this neighborhood of your filth once and for all." The spray hit with a roar, sending water and flecks of glitter flying into the air. I ran toward her, shouting for her to stop, but she doubled down, laughing triumphantly. The power washer hissed, the metal creaked, and then, with a sudden pop, the glitter bomb's waterproof seal gave way. The final charge detonated in a colossal wave of pink and gold mist, coating Karen from head to toe, soaking her clothes, and leaving her shrieking in a technicolor haze. The entire block went silent. Then, one by one, laughter erupted from every porch. Someone yelled, "3 strikes, Karen!" Another added, "You're the HOA fireworks!" As she stomped home, dripping, sputtering, and sparkling brighter than ever before, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about glitter anymore. It was about power, pride, and the one unstoppable law of suburban life, that the louder you try to control others, the harder you lose control yourself. And Karen? She had just detonated her last bit of credibility in full color. By Monday morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing like a hive after the glitter storm. Photos of Karen's power washer meltdown had spread beyond our sleepy cul-de-sac. Someone's teenager had posted the video on TikTok, where it had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views under the caption, "HOA Karen vs. Glitter Apocalypse." There were slow-motion edits, reaction memes, even one clip set to dramatic opera music. My mailbox, glowing faintly in the sun like some suburban monument, had become an accidental tourist attraction. Cars slowed to take pictures. Kids on bikes pointed and giggled. Karen, however, had disappeared. Her blinds stayed closed, her car unmoved. For the first time in months, there was silence. No early morning inspection walks, no clipboard tapping, no suspicious rustling near the mailboxes. At first, I enjoyed it. Then, as days passed, that silence began to feel wrong. Karen never retreated quietly. The calm lasted exactly 4 days. Friday afternoon, I received a letter in my mailbox, handwritten, no return address. It wasn't her usual official-looking nonsense, but the looping cursive and the scent of overused perfume gave her away instantly. It read, "You have humiliated me publicly. You have poisoned this community against me. You think you've won, but this is far from over. You'll see what real order looks like soon." It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it had the flavor of one. I showed it to my wife, who sighed and said, "You realize she's planning something theatrical, right? That's her way of staying relevant." "Yeah," I said. "And I'm done playing defense." That night, I opened my laptop and started typing a report to the HOA board and local authorities, attaching every clip, message, and fake notice she'd ever sent. It took hours. When I finished, I leaned back, exhausted but satisfied. This time, there would be no misunderstandings, no he said she said. Everything was documented. Saturday morning, I got my proof that Karen had indeed returned, and in typical overblown fashion. At sunrise, a loudspeaker crackled to life somewhere near the entrance of the neighborhood. I stepped outside to find Karen standing on the back of a rented pickup truck, microphone in hand, addressing a small cluster of confused residents. Behind her, a banner read, "Restore Community Values, HOA Recall Meeting." I nearly dropped my coffee. She'd gone full politician. "Friends and neighbors," she declared dramatically, "we've suffered too long under chaos. Our neighborhood has become a joke online, a laughingstock. We must act to reclaim our dignity." Someone from the crowd muttered, "You mean your dignity?" But she ignored it. She went on about online harassment, glitter terrorism, and the moral decay of male security. I leaned against my porch railing, watching the absurdity unfold. It might have been funny if she hadn't been dead serious. She waved a clipboard like a campaign prop and began collecting signatures for her HOA Restoration Initiative. By noon, the crowd had dispersed, mostly amused, not supportive. She stomped home, furious, dragging her banner behind her like a deflated parade float. That afternoon, I received a message from Mr. Green, the HOA president. "I think it's time we end this nonsense officially," he wrote. "Can you join a meeting tomorrow?" Absolutely. The next day, a small group gathered in the community center. Me, Mr. Green, 2 other board members, and, of course, Karen. She arrived late, wearing a white blazer and carrying a binder labeled, "Evidence." She set it down like she was presenting in a courtroom. "I demand immediate disciplinary action," she began, "for property sabotage, digital defamation, and neighborhood destabilization. I also request that the board suspend Mr. Turner's membership until the situation is resolved. Mr. Green rubbed his temples. Karen, we've reviewed everything. You were the one who tampered with Federal Mail property, twice. That's not true, she snapped. Those were staged. Staged by who? The universe, I said dryly. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? You've ruined my reputation. Karen, Mr. Green said, his patience thinning, your reputation was ruined by your own actions. The board has decided unanimously that you're to be removed from any HOA committee responsibilities effective immediately. For the first time since I'd known her, she went silent. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back into place. You can't do that. The community needs me. Actually, said one of the board members gently, it needs peace. She gathered her papers and stormed out without another word. Everyone exhaled. Do you think that's the end of it? One board member asked. I shook my head. Not even close. She doesn't know how to lose quietly. I was right. That evening, my motion sensor pinged again. This time, it wasn't Karen herself, it was two teenagers, the same nephews she'd recruited weeks ago. They were sneaking toward my yard carrying a large garbage bag. I turned on the porch light. They froze, caught mid-stride. Evening, gentlemen, I called. You here for the Glitter Museum tour? They bolted, dropping the bag before sprinting off down the street. Inside the bag were dozens of glitter-filled balloons, obviously meant to burst across my driveway. My wife joined me at the door, shaking her head. She's escalating again. Yeah, I said. But now she's using minors. That's her final mistake. I reported the incident to Deputy Tyler. He came by within the hour, collected the footage, and promised to handle it. She's crossed from nuisance into liability, he said. She'll get a formal warning this time. That warning arrived the next morning, and so did Karen's fury. She stood at the edge of my lawn, waving the deputy's paperwork like a surrender flag she refused to admit was hers. You've gone too far this time, she shouted. I remained calm. Karen, you had kids vandalizing property. Maybe sit this one out. She glared, her voice shaking. You think you're the hero here, but you're just a bully hiding behind rules. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked back inside. Let silence win for once. That night, something unexpected happened. Around 9 p.m., I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman in her 50s, polite, nervous, and vaguely familiar. Hi, she said. I'm Karen's sister. She asked me to talk to you. That alone made me cautious. She went on to explain that Karen had been under a lot of pressure lately. Her husband had left months ago, her real estate business was collapsing, her community involvement had become her entire identity. She's not evil, her sister said quietly. Just lost. For the first time, I felt something like pity. Not forgiveness, but understanding. People like Karen built their self-worth on control. When life took that away, they tried to rebuild it through rules, titles, or other people's boundaries. I thanked her sister and told her I didn't want to see Karen hurt, I just wanted peace. She nodded and left. For a brief moment, I hoped maybe that would be enough. It wasn't. 2 nights later, just past midnight, my driveway camera caught a new development. Karen, wearing gloves and a hoodie, placing something on top of my mailbox. I rushed outside, heart pounding, half expecting another act of vandalism. She froze when she saw me, caught under the porch light. Karen, I said, whatever this is, stop. Her expression softened, not angry, not mocking. Just tired. You've taken everything from me, she said quietly. My position, my respect, my privacy. I'm just giving you what you gave me. Then she turned and walked away. I approached the mailbox cautiously. On top sat a small cardboard box, sealed neatly, labeled in black marker. Property of the owner. My breath caught. I slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a single envelope, No glitter, no wires, just paper. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten apology. You were right. I went too far. I don't know why I kept pushing. Maybe because controlling things made me feel safe. I don't expect forgiveness. Just peace. K. I stood there for a long while, the night air cold against my skin, staring at the neat handwriting illuminated by the porch light. For once, there was no sarcasm, no manipulation, just exhaustion and something almost human. When I finally went inside, my wife was waiting at the window. What happened? She asked. She surrendered, I said quietly. But surrender wasn't the right word. It was more like she'd run out of energy to fight a war no one else was still waging. The next morning, her house looked different. The HOA safety signs were gone, the cameras taken down. Later that week, a moving truck appeared in her driveway. Word spread quickly. She was leaving town, moving in with her sister upstate. No farewell speech, no spectacle. Just quiet departure. I watched from my porch as the truck rolled away. The air felt lighter, the street calmer. For the first time in months, I could hear birds instead of argument. My wife joined me, smiling softly. You think it's really over? Yeah, I said. I think the glitter finally settled. She laughed. You're going to miss her, admit it. Maybe the chaos, I said. Not the person. We stood there for a while, watching the sun glint off the faint traces of glitter that still sparkled in the cracks of the pavement, tiny reminders of how absurd and strangely human the whole saga had been. I thought about how it all started. One mailbox, one entitled neighbor, and a simple act of pettiness that spiraled into something bigger. Somewhere in all that noise, I'd learned something unexpected, that sometimes the best revenge isn't humiliation or victory. It's outlasting the storm until the other person exhausts themselves trying to control it. And as the moving truck disappeared down the road, I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry or triumphant. I just felt free. But even as I turned to go inside, one quiet thought lingered in the back of my mind, a faint echo of irony I couldn't shake. Karen might have left, but the glitter? The glitter was never leaving. And maybe, just maybe, that was the perfect ending she never intended to write. A few weeks after Karen moved out, our neighborhood finally felt normal again. The air was quieter, lighter, almost too calm. People waved at each other more. Packages stayed where they were delivered. The HOA chat, once a war zone of all-caps rants and fake citations, now consisted mostly of recipe swaps and dog photos. It was like a collective sigh of relief had passed through the entire block. Still, sometimes, in the evenings when the sun hit the pavement just right, tiny flecks of glitter would catch the light, sparkling faintly as if the street itself refused to forget. I told myself it was over, that the chaos had ended, that Karen's chapter was finally closed. But peace, I've learned, has a strange way of feeling fragile when you've lived under siege for months. Every time a car paused too long near the mailbox, I'd glance up. Every time the doorbell rang unexpectedly, I'd feel that twinge of anticipation. My wife teased me about it. You've got glitter PTSD, she said. Maybe you need therapy. Maybe, I replied, half laughing. But you'd flinch too if you'd watched a mailbox explode 3 times in a row. We tried to move on. I repainted the mailbox, swapped the pressure trigger for a simple lock, and reconnected the motion sensor to my security app just in case. The neighbors joked that it was bulletproof now. In a way, it was emotional armor disguised as steel. One afternoon, about 2 months after she'd left, I got a letter addressed simply to Resident. It wasn't from the HOA. It was forwarded from her old address. Inside was a small postcard, a photo of a quiet lakeside cabin with pine trees and calm water. On the back, in the same looping handwriting, were 5 words. Thank you for the lesson. No signature, no return address, but I didn't need one. Karen's handwriting was unmistakable. I didn't know what to feel, relief, confusion, or something stranger. For the first time, her message didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like closure. I put it in a drawer and didn't tell anyone. A few days later, the HOA held its annual barbecue. Mr. Green was in high spirits, joking that this year's biggest achievement was surviving Karen's reign. People laughed, some cautiously, as if even saying her name might summon her back. I grilled burgers, chatted with neighbors, and tried not to think about her. But the stories kept resurfacing. The glitter bomb, the fake inspection notices, the federal property warnings. It had become neighborhood folklore. Halfway through the afternoon, a young couple who'd just moved in walked up to me. "You're the mailbox guy, right?" the husband asked. I groaned. "I guess that's my legacy now." He laughed. "You're a legend on Reddit, man. Someone posted the footage in a thread about suburban revenge stories." I froze. "What?" He showed me his phone. There it was. My porch cam footage, cropped and captioned, viewed over 1 million times. The title read, "HOA neighbor opens my mailbox, finds glitter justice." The comments were a mix of admiration and disbelief. This time I didn't feel angry. I felt proud. My ridiculous suburban saga had gone viral. My wife, ever the realist, shook her head when she saw it. "Great," she said. "Now you're famous for weaponizing arts and crafts." "Could be worse," I said. "At least I didn't lose my mind over a mailbox." But fame, even accidental, has side effects. Within a week, people were driving through our neighborhood trying to find the glitter mailbox. Someone left a note on my door asking for an autograph. A YouTuber even emailed asking to recreate the experiment. Mr. Green begged me to let it die down before we get another Karen. That was fair. I took down the porch footage, deleted the original upload, and decided to let the internet find a new obsession. For a while, it seemed like the world had finally moved on, until the day of the new homeowners orientation. The HOA had invited all residents to meet the buyers who'd purchased Karen's house. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. We gathered on the lawn, curious to see who was brave enough to take on that address. The moving truck was already there, the back open, boxes labeled "fragile" stacked neatly inside. Then the car pulled up, a silver SUV with tinted windows. Out stepped a tall woman in her 40s, wearing sunglasses and a confident smile. She waved at everyone, clearly friendly. Behind her came her husband and teenage daughter. "I'm Claire," she said cheerfully. "We're so happy to be here." People exhaled in collective relief. Finally, a normal family. But then, as movers carried boxes into the house, I noticed something that made me freeze mid-handshake. In her hands, Claire was holding a large clear storage bin filled with decorative jars. Jars that shimmered faintly in the light. Glitter. "Nice place," she said to me, noticing my stare. "The neighborhood seems lively." I managed a polite smile. "Oh, you have no idea." That night, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the public records. The buyer's full name was Claire Larson. Same last name. Karen's sister. I sat back, staring at the screen, torn between laughter and dread. Either Karen had convinced her sister to buy the house, or the sister had decided to move in on her own. Either way, it felt like the universe was laughing at me. When I told my wife, she groaned. "You're cursed." "I think it's hereditary," I said. "The glitter gene runs in the family." But days passed, and to my surprise, Claire wasn't anything like her sister. She was polite, low-key, even helpful. She hosted small gatherings, waved at everyone, and stayed out of other people's business. No clipboards, no fake badges, no HOA proclamations. For the first time in forever, I actually liked my neighbor. Until one morning, about 3 weeks later, I found a small, neatly wrapped package in my mailbox. No return label, but the handwriting on the tag was familiar. The same looping cursive as before. It read, "For old time's sake. K." I stared at it, heart thudding. When I lifted the lid, I half expected another glitter bomb. But inside wasn't a trap. It was a small glass ornament, clear, sealed, filled with shimmering pink and gold glitter. Tied around it was a tiny note, peace can still sparkle. I laughed, a quiet, genuine laugh. It was her last word, her way of closing the loop. No malice, no control. Just a strange, poetic goodbye. That evening, I hung the ornament in my workshop, right above my workbench. It caught the light perfectly, refracting little beams of color onto the tools. My wife rolled her eyes when she saw it. "You really kept that?" "Sure," I said. "It's a trophy." "A trophy for what?" "Winning a glitter war." "No," I said. "For surviving one." Life returned to its easy rhythm. Claire became a friend. She even brought over cookies one weekend and joked that she'd ban glitter from the premises forever. We both laughed harder than we should have. Months went by, and the legend of the glitter mailbox faded into neighborhood myth. New residents heard the story secondhand, about some guy who built a trap that made the HOA explode. They never quite believed it, and that was fine by me. One spring afternoon, while cleaning out my garage, I found the old motion sensor voice box from the original mailbox. I hooked it up out of nostalgia, pressed play, and the familiar monotone echoed through the air. "Warning. You are interacting with federal property. This activity is being recorded." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. As I looked around the quiet street, sunlight filtering through trees, kids playing, no clipboards in sight, I realized the whole ridiculous saga had taught me something important. The real power in dealing with people like Karen wasn't outsmarting them or retaliating cleverly. It was patience, the ability to stand your ground, let them unravel under the weight of their own obsession, and walk away intact. Because glitter fades, but truth doesn't. And sometimes the best revenge isn't poetic justice, it's peace that no one can take credit for. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the streetlights flickered on, I took one last look at the mailbox that had started it all. The steel gleamed faintly under the soft glow, its surface still catching a few stubborn flecks of glitter that refused to wash away. I smiled. The war was over. The neighborhood was calm. And somewhere, miles away, Karen was probably sitting by that lake, watching the water shimmer, still finding meaning in the sparkle she once hated. Maybe she finally learned that control is just another kind of prison, and maybe, just maybe, I learned that sometimes a little glitter in life isn't so bad after all. Because when the dust settles, when the noise fades, and the world moves on, what remains isn't the chaos or the feud. It's the story. And in our small corner of suburbia, the story would live forever, shimmering, absurd, and perfectly human, in every last stubborn speck of glitter that the wind refused to blow away.